What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, what I'm going to do is show you guys how to replace the valve cover on this 2015 Chevy Cruze with a 1.4 liter turbo engine. So what this vehicle has is obviously a leaking valve cover. If you guys watched my last video, you guys might have seen that I mentioned that I was possibly going to replace this valve cover gasket, and I did do a little test on it, which was adding some dye into the oil, and from my little experiment, I did see that it was leaking from the corners. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to replace this. I would strongly recommend for you guys to get a whole new valve cover with gasket from the dealership, because these guys have an issue with a diaphragm that's behind this cover that will eventually fail. So if you're gonna do this, make sure that you replace your valve cover and your valve cover gasket at the same time, so that you guys don't have to do this for a long time. So the process that I'm going to show you in today's video is going to apply to other General Motor engines that are 1.4 liters. So I hope you guys do find this video useful if you guys are also going to do this to your vehicle. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the video. Before you guys do anything, make sure that you disconnect your battery so that you don't short anything out. To remove this valve cover gasket, it's actually not too bad. There is some things that you guys need to keep in mind. There is a rubber hose, PCV hose, that is right here. This is replaced, but the stock one can get pretty brittle, and if you guys move this out of the way, it's possible that you might damage it and break it. So be very careful when you guys are removing this hose out of the way. Also, the electrical connections tend to break because everything is plastic on these cars, and it just gets old and brittle, so a lot of the things will break. So be very careful when you guys are doing this on your vehicle. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is pop this cover off. So there's just some plastic clips that this is held down by, so just go ahead and pull it out of the way. The next thing you're gonna do is go ahead and remove this electrical connection out of the way. Be very careful with this because you can break it. Go ahead and use a small flathead like I'm using right here, and you're gonna go ahead and push down on the pink section right here. You're gonna push it down a little bit, and then you're gonna pull it out of the way, and then that should allow you to pull the clip out. So with that out of the way, go ahead and remove the wiring harness around the valve cover. There is a few clips that hold some plastic brackets onto the valve cover. So you want to go ahead and remove all of that together. Go ahead and use the flathead to go ahead and get behind these plastic brackets, and it will basically allow you to pop it all off completely. So the next thing we're going to do now is remove the coil packs in the middle. There is two T30 fasteners that hold this down. Go ahead and remove it. Be very careful not to break these, because they don't sell them individually. You have to buy the whole part, so be very careful. This plastic is very brittle, so just take your time. With those two fasteners out, this should just come right off. So this is basically how you guys would remove your spark plugs if you guys wanted to. As you guys can tell, it's not too difficult. Since we're not doing that today, we're going to go ahead and continue removing the valve cover. There is a few fasteners that hold the valve cover onto the top of the engine. First thing you're going to do is remove your oil dipstick, and then you can go ahead and remove your oil cap, because you're going to have to transfer it over to your new valve cover. So these fasteners are E10s. So the valve cover is pretty much ready to come off, but before I take it off, what I'm going to do is bungee cord all the vacuum lines and wiring out of the way. This is going to make it easier for us to install the new valve cover. So now that we have the wiring loom and the vacuum lines out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and remove the valve cover. Use this small flathead to help you pry this off. It might be a little stuck because there's some gasket maker that you had to install. So that might be a little bit difficult, but it should come off once you remove the fasteners. So before you guys install your new valve cover gasket, you're going to go ahead and clean off the mating surfaces. Also, don't forget to remove the old gasket maker that they installed from the factory. Once you install everything back on, you're going to go ahead and apply some of that gasket maker on the corners as well. So the mating surfaces are nice and clean. Now it's time to install the valve cover gasket back onto the vehicle. So just to compare these two valve cover gaskets, this is the original valve cover here on the left side. And this is the brand new updated part for this vehicle. You guys can see that the valve cover gasket looks like it has been modified a little bit, probably because it's pretty common to get these valve cover gasket leaks on these vehicles, and I think they updated the design of the valve cover gasket, and that's pretty apparent from these two side-by-side comparisons. For those that are wondering, this is the original part number right here. If you guys order it like this, you're gonna get the valve cover and the valve cover gasket for around 70 bucks, which is a pretty good deal considering how much the valve cover gasket alone is. And like I said, I would highly recommend for you guys to get the whole thing, because that diaphragm that the vehicle has will eventually fail. So this is gonna prevent that from happening in the future. So before we install the valve cover gasket, I'm going to go ahead and apply some gasket maker on the corners where the timing cover and the rest of the engine meet. So it's going to be in these two areas right here. You're going to want to use a generous amount, but don't overdo it, because if you guys overdo it, it could fall off and potentially clog the oil pickup tube, and you don't want that. So just be smart about it, don't overdo it, but you do want to use a generous amount. So now you want to go ahead and install your valve cover with your valve cover gasket in place. So with the valve cover in place, you just want to make sure that the gasket is not kinked up anywhere before you fasten it down. You're going to go ahead and fasten down these fasteners to, I believe, 72 inch-pounds, which is different from foot-pounds. So just make sure that you guys torque these guys to the proper spec. It doesn't take much to break one of these, so just be very careful. And then just go ahead and put everything back together. So I'm going to let this sit for an hour so that the gasket can properly sit in place, and then I'm going to go ahead and fasten down the fasteners. One thing that I forgot to mention to you guys is that you need to transfer your oil cap neck right here for the valve cover. So this is a locking retainer that holds this guy in place on the valve cover. To remove this, you just have to remove these little brackets from here, and once you do that, it'll allow you to spin it off of the valve cover gasket and basically transfer it over to your replacement valve cover. I forgot to mention to you guys that there is a little arrow key on the bottom part of this plastic oil neck. So you want to make sure that the arrow is pointing towards the front of the engine. If you guys don't line that up, it's basically not gonna fit. So don't try to force it in there. It should just go in there nice and smooth. So now go ahead and put everything back together. Don't forget to install your oil dipstick and your oil cap. So I've let the valve cover sit for about an hour. I'm gonna go ahead and fasten down these fasteners and torque them down. Make sure that you guys follow this torque sequence when you guys are tightening down these fasteners. It's very important that you guys follow this pattern because as you guys are moving around and tightening down these fasteners, the valve cover basically shifts a little bit, and that can cause a leak. So make sure to follow this pattern. So now that I've fastened down these fasteners, I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together. To install everything is basically the opposite of removing it. So I'm not going to show you guys in detail how to do that, but I will give you guys a little time lapse of putting everything back together. So this is pretty much going to wrap up the end of the video. I hope you guys did find it entertaining and useful if you guys are going to be doing this on your vehicle. If you guys did find it useful, make sure to give the video a thumbs up. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.